The chess masters are duking it out. Universal pulls its catalog from Triller. Triller says, we don't need Universal. Universal announces deal with TikTok. Your move, Triller. Let's talk about this. Hello there and welcome to Music Industry City's Tuesday Talk Tuesday, where we discuss what's going on in the world of music business. I'm Peter Schwing. Joins me always my co-host Sam Tall. If there's something you'd like to chime in about, join us in the chat or let us hear your thoughts in the comments below. It's all okay. You don't have to be shy. We're also starting this new thing that we're going to wrap the segment. So when we wrap the segment, we come back after that closing bumper, we come back and it's only going to be on YouTube and Twitch. So we're going to shut down the Facebook feed, the live feed. So if you want to comment, come over to the Twitch side. That's twitch.tv/Peter Schwing, or go to YouTube, Music Industry City. So we have a lot to talk about. This is this heated up late last week. Actually, it was on a Friday. And then when we woke up Monday, there was a whole bunch more. So let's get into a few quotes that I'm pulling out here, and then we're going to lead in with this. And what we have is Triller, okay? So this is Triller's response to Universal pulling out their catalog. Triller does not need a deal with UMG to continue operating as it has been, since the relevant artists are already shareholders or partners on Triller and thus can authorize their usage directly. Triller has no use for a licensing deal with UMG. Monday, we wake up, and so happens that Universal announces the deal with TikTok. So this alliance sets an industry-wide example of social media companies acknowledging, respecting, and compensating the music creators whose songs are instrumental to their platforms. We appreciate TikTok's partnership and look forward to working together to provide support and opportunities to our songwriters. Let's turn to Sam Tall and get his thoughts on this. Sam? Where to begin?
So before we really kind of like go over what the hell happened, I wanna mention a couple points of historical context. Number one, Triller has hired music industry, not just their president of business operations is a former SVP of digital new media, whatever, from Universal, notably, but they've had a council of women in music industry. They've had other people from the digital side of the music business come in and work on licensing with them. Number two, this isn't a new license. Triller has had a license with Universal. This is a renegotiation that broke down. So Triller's statement that they can just continue operating the way they have because they don't need a license and so this changes nothing completely ignores the fact that the way they've been operating was under license.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the license expired. So I know you have a lot to say. I just want to, and you're probably going to touch upon it when I give you the screen. But, there's two things here that really was notable about this, these statements, is because, it's also alleged that the Sony, Universal, and Warner are stakeholders, minority stakeholders in Triller, though that's only a source has said that, so it's not necessarily confirmed. But the whole thing is that Triller stating they don't need a deal with the artist, don't need a deal with the label, because they have the artists are already shareholders or partners. Therefore, they can do a direct deal with them. That's not how it works. I
heard you talking about that yesterday with the Duke.
And I want to, because it's like, if I have a direct deal with Triller and I'm an artist, but yet Universal, I have a deal with Universal, they have the rights, and there's lots of different layers. So that's one point. And the second point is this alliance, the way the phrasing of the alliance announcement with TikTok. And it's,
Yeah.
they set an industry-wide example of social media companies acknowledging, respecting,
Right.
and compensating. I mean, if that's
Oh, I
not a
love it.
shot across the bow, I don't know what is. So I know you have a lot to say on this, so I'm going to let you roll. All right.
I think you're pointing out exactly the right things. One of which being the equity factor, one of which being the timing of the TikTok piece, and the other last bit being the artist's sort of involvement in rights. As an artist manager and as a digital right administrator in two separate facilities, I have come into contact with this in several instances. Um, and notably, signing an independent band to Universal Music Group once upon a time, I go into that kind of conversation with the artist and into the negotiation with the label, full well knowing that we are granting our right to make our own licenses and to do things like sync without label permission, to do things like features and remixes and content deals. Now, from a digital rights admin perspective, if it's just distribution, especially independent music aggregation, all those rights are retained and you can make whatever choices you want. And so if, for example, TuneCore or DistroKid or somebody makes a deal with Triller to provide all that music, artists can opt in or opt out as they see fit. Whereas artists that are signed to a rights ownership deal with a major label or even an independent, since TikTok has deals with all three majors and Merlin and like other indie consortiums, the artists don't necessarily have the opportunity to opt out. They've already opted into a deal that waives that right to reject. Now, obviously, there's political things there. The artists can say no, but they can't say yes without the label permission. So I don't know where Triller's getting that information, and this is what makes it so confusing and so laughable, and why Universal very pointedly said, the Triller's statement is removed from reality. That's the direct quote. And I think it behooves not just Triller, but anybody in tech who is considering the use of music as a part of their service to take this seriously and understand the field that they're playing in, because it's not the same. Independent creators on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, if you're a vlogger or a lifestyle creator, influencer, whatever have you, there's very little you have to worry about in terms of what rights and clearance needs to be obtained, because you own the videos you make and the videos just have that one bit. There's not a whole stack of copyrights the way that there is in music. And this is what I have to teach people every day is, you can't use music with impunity because that's a whole stack of rights. Even if we wanted to say yes, we're not the last person you have to ask. And so what I'd like to see is, Triller kind of issuing mea culpa. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's hilarious that Universal announces their TikTok deal shortly after this whole debacle. I am almost certain that was not originally the intent, that they were going to hold off on that announcement until some other point in time, but it became a nice cudgel for the way that they're being dealt with Triller. I'd like to see Triller kind of own this and say, yep, that was a mistake. We're sorry. Let's negotiate in good faith. But even if they wanted to, they've now completely undermined their negotiating position and they have no leverage anymore. So if anything, we might see Triller start to fall apart.
Really interesting on top of this is you're talking about two companies that are looking to go public. And when you have this, it's like Triller needs all that leverage that they can get and to be able to say, hey, we're playing nice and we're getting all this licensing. And the fact is, you're talking about going up against the number one label group in the world, okay? And that's not how you're going to make friends. That's not going to show. I mean, on one hand, it shows that, okay, we're confident and we're strong, but it also can show a little bit of lack of understanding how relationships work in the music business, because as it's tech versus the music industry as it's always been. And yes, has the music industry done a lot to try to stop innovation and everything? Yes. Okay. Let's state this as clear as possible.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, This goes back to when FM radio and music was played in the 20s, and they started playing music. Labels were they actually weren't asking. No, the labels never asked their artists. They tell their artists that you have to amend your deal that you will not allow your music to be played on the radio. Labels were saying so. Talk about that's the latest technology of like the 20s.
Right.
So that's just the foundation. Okay, so we have that as a foundation. Tech has the foundation of do first, ask for forgiveness later. And tech has that ego of like, hey, well, look what we're doing. We're saving you. We're giving you more opportunities. And if you look at the history of like deals and when the major labels would get into like different technologies, it's like Universal always had like a little hold off. They're like, we're okay being the last kid on the block. Then they started jumping in saying, we want to be the first kid on the block on this. So it's like, depending on what it is. So now it's like, well, they had the deal structure and it expired. And we don't know what was going on in the negotiations of that deal, but then to make a press release, and that's the one thing that was the other first shot across the bow, was saying that they released it in a press statement. And that's what Triller had issues with. Like, I found out from a press statement, why would they do something like this? Well, that means there's something more going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I definitely don't buy that that's like the first time they heard about that. Maybe they're just not reading their email over the weekend. But suffice it to say, Universal's been generally pretty positive about, being innovative and trying to get ahead of the punch. So much so that Spotify talks about Universal in their own press releases and investor statements, talking about Universal as like this advanced and forward-thinking and innovative partner in rights licensing, and Spotify simultaneously is doing everything they can to diversify away from music and really kind of talk up their podcast business because it costs them less money. It's easier for them to run that, and it doesn't require the sort of like deep cabal licensing that you get with the major labels and the indie consortiums. So it's so crazy to me that I feel like Triller had an opportunity to get this very right and really set themselves up for being competitive with TikTok, because the labels very much want, more entrants in the space, more opportunities for artists to break. TikTok is very proud of the fact that they now are such a wellspring of massive hits. And I'm sure that the labels who are constantly seeking those hits would love to have that come from more places than just one platform at a time. And it's crazy to me that this got so botched. It just seems like it was completely unnecessarily thrown away. It reminds me of other sort of like tech advanced things, just like with, this is unrelated, but the whole like rumor of Apple and Hyundai working on a car, and then the news starts to get out and Apple's like, oh no, we're not doing that. And then Hyundai's like, yeah, we're no longer discussing this with Apple. It's like, oh, I guess not, because now that it's out, you can't stand behind it. And everybody's like, well, our cover's blown.
Right. I mean, Apple's very good about like anything that if you read an article on Apple saying Apple's planning on doing this, it's all rumor. It's all speculation. Apple is so tight-lipped on letting out their information until they let it out.
And even if it were true, the minute it kind of like gets into the public sphere, they're going to pull back and say, no, we're going to kill that project. You ruined the fun.
So to go back to this now with TikTok, I mean, how much of this coincidence of the timing, because it's not like they just re-up their deal with TikTok just from Friday and over the weekend. It's
right.
Those kind of things take months, okay, if not even like over a year, and there's a lot of negotiating going on. So is it just that maybe it was in play, and it could have been, maybe it was a pre-announced, like they were going to say, hey, we're going to announce it on Monday, but they're like, let's hold off a little to see how this Triller thing works out, and then we'll like,
yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's a week, but
yeah, I'd love to see what the thinking around that was. I'd love to hear an inside source. If anybody out there watching, is in the trenches at Universal or at TikTok and knows kind of like what the timing was supposed to be, it just seems all too perfect that it happened when it did. So I have to imagine that wasn't the original intent. That said, we know TikTok, having put together licenses recently with Warner and with Sony and Merlin, et cetera, this has been in the works. Like, this isn't something that just like came about. Of course, like you mentioned, it didn't just come to fruition over the weekend. It's been, on the fire for a while, and now, TikTok users can use a lot more music from the Universal catalog, which I'm sure some parts of what other catalogs carry was restricted by Universal not having a blanket deal in place. But especially in light of the Super Bowl, right? And this is something that I immediately thought about Sunday night, was with Universal having a deal with TikTok, but not with Triller, you can have clips of The Weeknd on TikTok, but not on Triller, at least not legally. And I'm sure, there's going to be clips that appear and that live up there and get shared and whatnot else. But, it's going to be sanctioned in one place and unsanctioned in another. And just kind of, Triller has an obligation at this point to police that content lest they be, sued and dragged through the mud even further. Whereas TikTok can very proudly stand up and say, like, oh yeah, look at all these, clips of The Weeknd and all of his music. And oh, by the way, you can use any of his music in your videos. Here's his sound library. It's such a stark difference. And I definitely, would love to know whether the timing of the TikTok deal was coordinated based on the Super Bowl, was coincidental entirely, was rushed, thanks to the Triller news. I don't think we'll ever know, but it's nice to imagine that the games are actually that petty. It is the music industry after all.
Yeah, I mean, we all love a little bit of a good conspiracy kind of like discussion. Not like getting really deep into it, but like, hey, we always like to opine about like, hey, I wonder if this, and then people will be talking about it on Clubhouse.
Right, of course. They're going to talk about it infinitely with no more knowledge than we have.
Exactly. So, all right, Sam, last thoughts on this before we cut out of the segment, and then then for everybody tuning in, we're going to come back over on YouTube and Twitch to just continue the conversation. But Sam, final thoughts on this?
My final thoughts are this. It's not even about Triller, but music licensing in general at this scale is very complicated and very expensive and takes a long time, and is, as we now know, as we've seen before as well, easily disrupted by a couple wrong chess moves. On the one hand, I think there is just a willful lack of understanding on the part of application developers, technologists, et cetera, to play nice and to work with the institutions that carry the rights that they need to launch their products. On the other hand, I also am increasingly of the opinion that especially with the advent of the MLC and kind of like the tenor that takes and what that means for the industry going forward, that music licensing could probably stand to be a little bit easier. It could probably stand to just be simpler, more straightforward, and more of these deals can be easier to execute without just basically being an all or nothing proposition with content owners at the scale of the majors, because they have millions of copyrights and they conquer together 70 to 80% of all the music that people actually care about anyway. It strikes me as unfair anti-competitive practice to now. I'm not making any declarations by antitrust, but it seems like it's very sort of unfavorable to everyone when we can't have a copacetic structure, and business doesn't have to be adversarial the way that it is. We can always find a way to make it work. So I'm kind of like split on that, but this is just the latest proof that we're not even close to figuring out a amenable solution to the licensing problems.
Right on. All right. Thanks, Sam. As always, fantastic thoughts and opinions on this. We're going to wrap up here. That's going to be it for today. And if you want to continue the conversation, we are going to come back on YouTube and Twitch after we roll the credits here. So you can join this and leave a comment below. And if you find this interesting, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to be alerted about new shows. You can also find us at musicindustrycity.com and on your preferred podcast player. Thank you again to my co-host, Sam Tall. Have a rocking day. Peace.